are kicking off our Life After the Core focus with a fireside chat with my friend, John Ferguson, the Senior Vice President and Chief Human Resource Officer at NASCAR. That's a lot to say, John. In fact, it's my distinct honor to introduce you to John. I first met John when he was a college student at Furman University. And as you know, Furman is one of our esteemed university partners. Over his summer breaks, John worked with me as a college counselor for Bridges to a Brighter Future, a college access program that I directed at the time. It has been my privilege and honor to watch John excel as a professional and, most importantly, as a father. In September 2021, a little over a year ago, John was named to oversee human resources at NASCAR. In this role, he is responsible for the development and execution of NASCAR's human resource planning in support of the overall business plan and strategic direction of the organization. No doubt a big job for John. He is headquartered in Daytona Beach, Florida, with offices throughout the United States. He helps employ and evaluate career paths, oversee all HR functions, and implement special tactics to help meet NASCAR's targeted goals. Previously, John served in HR roles at Monumental Sports and Entertainment in Washington, D.C., and as Vice President of People and Culture. While at Monumental Sports and Entertainment, he led the HR function for 6 sports team properties, including the Washington Wizards, Washington Capitals, and Washington Mystics. 4 facilities, including Capital One Arena and more than 2,500 employees. John received his Bachelor's of Arts degree in Political Science from Furman University in 2009. He received his Executive Certificate in Strategic Diversity and Inclusion Management from Georgetown University in 2019, and his MBA from Howard University in 2021. John is also a husband to Uwe and father to Maddie and Olivia. Please join me in the chat to give John a very warm welcome to our virtual assembly.
Perfect. Thank you, Tobi, for the warm welcome and introduction. This is going to be super casual, super fun. So I hope everyone puts on their seatbelts and gets ready to start their engines, because Tobi and I go way back. And so this is going to be like 2 friends chatting and catching up. So first, thank you so much for the invitation to join. I feel like this is a home safe space for me, because Bridges is closely aligned to the same impact and good work that College Advising Corps is doing. So I already have a little bit of insight into the perspective and the drive and the motivation with the advisors that they bring to the table. And I have a little insight of what you're experiencing and what those conversations with the students that you coach and mentor throughout the process. So excited to be here, excited to share anything I can do to help sort of motivate you to find your success path. A lot of times people call it a career path, but I want to change it up. Let's call it a success path, because the success path can go like this. And that is what life is going to give to you. A career path, you kind of think like it's this step, then that step, then this step. No, life is nuanced. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
I love that. And as you can already tell, put your seatbelts on. No, that is an appropriate metaphor for NASCAR as well. So John, thank you so much for being here. We're really grateful that you set aside time. No doubt your schedule is really busy. In preparing for this, I did the math, and we have known each other for 16 years. And neither of us has aged at all. So that statement needs to be made.
Well, what I will say is Tobi knew me when I had hair, y'all. I had hair at some point,
yes.
And she knew me when I had a head full of hair. So
that's true. I first met you when you interviewed to be a summer college counselor with Bridges to a Brighter Future, a program focused on low-income and first-generation students. As you've already mentioned, this role is very similar to the role that CAC advisors have in schools. Could you tell me a little bit about your experience as a summer college advisor and how it shaped your perspective and path after college?
I would say Bridges is a core component to my undergraduate experience. When I think about the lifelong relationships I built with the counselors and the staff, but also the lifelong relationships that I built with the students. At that time, so these were high school students who we would describe them as whose potential outdistanced their circumstances. And I love that phrase because what we fail to realize sometimes in life is that we all have these nuanced circumstances that come with us wherever we go. So my journey to this desk and to this Zoom looks very similar to some and very different from others. I think what I learned most from Bridges, someone was talking about grace, just the art of giving grace, because we don't know what bags people are carrying. We don't know what life experiences they're carrying and what they've had to overcome to get to that place. And so when I think about Bridges, it really opened my eyes to different experiences. I'm a firm believer you don't know what you don't know. And sometimes in life, we need to make sure we remind ourselves to stay curious. It's very easy to see someone and sort of put them in a bucket. But in Bridges and through my fellow peer counselor group or the students, I realized like, wow, maybe my first impression was this. But when you layer in what's below that waterline and what people have had to overcome, you just have a whole new respect for how they're thriving and where they want to go. And then it also lets you know, like, I want to pour into them. Like, so even throughout life, if I have something to give from a coaching sort of standpoint or a motivating standpoint, or maybe where I fell and bruised my knee, if I can give that away to you for free so you can start at a different point in your journey or at a faster pace or at a higher spot than where I was, I want to do it because life is about lifting as we climb. If we can help the next generation be stronger and better than we were, that's what my goal is in all that I do in any space that I come in contact with. I think I really learned the power of relationships though in Bridges. And I think it's important, the art of storytelling. I was able to get exposure and practice interpersonal skills that have guided me and led me to where I am today in Bridges. When you're connecting with students that maybe you haven't met, connecting with students that may be introverted, connecting with students that just don't know how to respond to this environment because it's so different than what they are in their home space. So being able to figure out how can I connect with this student because it may be different than how I connect with the other students. So the art of storytelling and just being transparent. I think transparency goes a long ways because I don't want them to think that I'm the advisor or counselor and I have it all figured out. No, I don't. I've made some of the same mistakes that you may have made, and we're all human, and let's get through it together.
That's amazing. John, you were definitely one of the best summer counselors that I worked with, no doubt.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, we won't share that on LinkedIn because we don't want others to feel bad, but you were definitely phenomenal, and your answer just is a reflection of that. You were a first-generation college student at Furman University, and then through your role, you supported and mentored first-generation students, as you've articulated. What extent has being the first been significant in your college experience? And have you had any similar experiences as an adult?
I continue to have similar experiences as an adult. I think Furman really allowed me a training ground for that, being a first generation student at Furman. But then also Furman is a PWI, so there weren't many people that looked like me on campus. So learning how to navigate those spaces, I think that when you're an undergrad, it's really about, of course, your major is somewhat important, but I think above your major is your ability to build your people skills. How can I work with this group? How can I find my passion and purpose in this group? How can I be a leader? How do I get to fulfill what I need to fulfill here? And I think that college is really the training ground for that. And I think sometimes we focus really heavily on like the major, but I really think it's the social skills because you learn how to work with people that don't always carry their weight. You learn how to work with people in group projects. And guess what? That's the real world too. So I think look at how you can translate those experiences to what you're doing there. First generation, I do pride my parents on, I never felt limited in what I could do, but there were also moments of, I thought maybe some things were just kind of potentially like, how do you get there? I just didn't know how to get there. I knew it was an option, but maybe I didn't see myself there. So I'm a firm believer you can't be what you can't see. So in my role today, I am allowing people to see someone who they may not expect in the role, but I'm also helping to drive the narrative in the direction of where NASCAR is going. So we're celebrating our 75th season, and our motto is always forward. And I love that, always forward, because we all have history. We all have bridges that we had to cross. But what we really want to try to focus on is going forward. There's so much in our rearview mirrors that we can't go back and change. But if we can be intentional with how we set out strategy, how we design processes, how we impact the people and lives around us as we go forward, that's where the real impact is.
John, it's been a real pleasure to observe you in your new role and to see the changes and differences you're already making in your role through your minority internship program and things like that. So that's just, it's beautiful and amazing to see.
Thank you.
So your first job, go ahead.
I was gonna say one thing on the internship program. I think I've been able to elevate the sort of brand awareness of that program, but let it be known that program has been around with NASCAR for over 20 years.
Wow.
Small fact, who in here in the chat has watched 106 in Park? I might be dating myself. It was on BET years ago. There was a co-host.
There are a few me's coming up.
There you go. There was a co-host who's still like a host, an actor, entertainment news, Terrence J. Terrence J, who is a graduate of North Carolina A&T University. He was a NASCAR diversity intern.
Oh,
so
wow.
It's just interesting how NASCAR has been incorporated in some things that people just, I think, naturally wouldn't associate with or just wouldn't know. So I always share that story. I learned it when I was like, he really was? Like, wow, that's pretty cool. So the internship program has been around for years. So as you're advising your students, alert them to the opportunity, please.
That's awesome. So your first job out of college was to work for Hyatt Regency in Washington, D.C. I remember this. I remember when you accepted that position. And you were promoted after a little less than 2 years into a manager role. How did you get into human resources? Because I know that wasn't your initial vision for yourself. And was it a career that was on your radar, or was it out of the blue? How did that evolve?
I like to say I fell into HR. So I was a poli-sci major. So the connection to DC and politics is what got me there. In undergrad, I did an internship in DC. And so I was like, this was fun. I enjoy this political science major. Great. I got close to senior year and I was like, the famous question comes, what are you doing next? And I was kind of like, I don't know. So my quick answer was, I'm moving to DC. And so that's what I did. I did Bridges one more summer after I graduated. And then that July, I moved to DC. I had some fillers out there for opportunities. The internship that I had, the gentleman said, hey, when you graduate in 2 years, we'll give you a job. Guess what? None of that happened. So I moved to DC unemployed with faith and a prayer, really. I had to figure out how to get a job to pay this rent. So not to belong the story, but I want to also help you understand it. Like, there were some stutter steps. There was a lot of, this isn't what I thought I was going to be doing. So my first job in DC was at DSW Shoes. Yes, I was selling shoes. I needed a part-time job to at least have some income. From there, I landed a job. I got a bunch of no's. But there was a coworker or someone that lived in my apartment building who said he worked at Hyatt Hotels. And I heard Hyatt. I'm like, I automatically summed it up to, I don't want to change sheets. Like, I didn't think of hospitality as much more than that. But after 30 days and more no's, I said, hey, you said you have a referral program. I think I'm interested in changing some beds or whatever that looks like. So I actually applied for a convention service position, which was setting up tables and chairs overnight. I come in for an interview. They immediately are like, you're overqualified. So I've heard you're underqualified, you're overqualified. In that moment, I said, well, hey, I actually looked at your jobs last night. You have an HR coordinator role open, and I've applied. Lights started going off, and they were excited. I was excited. So they asked me to hang around, and about a week later, they offered me the HR coordinator role. Was I looking for HR roles? Not necessarily, but I knew the opportunities on Capitol Hill were limited, and a lot of them were coming across as unpaid. I just could not financially do unpaid work. And so I was looking at government jobs in HR. You move to DC, the government is the largest employer. So I was like, oh, that a route. But I landed in HR at Hyatt, and I essentially never looked back. When I think about a lot of the transferable skills that I gained in undergrad through the Bridges program, and then personally, you know, I was always involved in student council in high school. HR is similar into the principal's office to a degree. You know, I don't want you to be afraid to come to the office, but HR is always in the know. And so that was what I was excited about. Before the general employee population would be aware of something, HR is in the seat of advising how we want to communicate that, what will the impacts be, how our employees feel about it. So that is how I got to HR. It was not my intention when I first moved to DC, but things happen for a reason, and I believe in that roadmap or that success path. We're talking about it, success path that guided me to HR.
Yeah, that's great. You mentioned a little bit about the transferable skills that you had that brought you to HR. Is there any more that you'd add related to the art of advising and how that translates to human resources?
I think advising is HR. I think what I enjoy about my role, I came up in the HR sort of career path from a generalist perspective. So I had touch points across the entire spectrum of HR. What I enjoy most is the coaching aspect, advocating for people, counseling, being a cheerleader, having some tough conversations when tough conversations need to happen. I believe in keeping it real with people, like, hey, let's just take a step back. I know there's probably a lot of emotion right now, but let's take a step back and try to look at this objectively. You did X and that led to Y. So how do we want to rebound from this, or how can I help you land potentially elsewhere? And so I enjoy that. I think a lot of times other people can see your strength and your light better than you can. And so a lot of times it's the opportunity to say, you're really good at this. Like, this is a strength of yours. And they're like, really? I never realized that. But from my seat, I'm kind of seeing the full landscape. I'm like, no, this is your special skill set. This is your gift. And I firmly believe that while we're here in this physical space, our mission in life or the world will go without if we don't find our passion and purpose and execute it, because it's uniquely to each of you in this chat. You have something that makes you special. And the world will go without if you don't tap into that. And so I believe in making sure that people have strong emotional intelligence. If I had to tell you one skill that you should practice and perfect, is emotional intelligence. I'm still practicing. I'm still perfecting that. But you have to remember that you have such opportunity to control how you respond to things. And so I think definitely understand emotional intelligence in relationships. We talked about the things that I learned in undergrad, things I learned from Bridges, or things you learn from advising. You're in a safe space to figure out how to connect with people. And that is what business is about. I read a quote the other day, or I think it's Tobi's quote, actually. Maybe I'll hold on it, or maybe I'll throw it out there. But Tobi shared that, what is this about the speed?
It was that organizational impact happens at the speed of relationships. Or it was actually, I wrote it down, John. Reverend Jennifer Bailey of Faith Matters Network stated, I heard her say this once, relationships are built at the speed of trust, and social change happens at the speed of relationships.
That is true. That is true. I want everyone to understand that. So I'm jumping ahead probably in some of our talking points, but when I joined NASCAR, that was when that was really cemented for me, the art of relationships. Now, I've always known and felt that I was pretty good at figuring out connective tissue. That's what I like to call it, connective tissue to people. I believe that, so I'm joining NASCAR. I'm relocating from Washington, D.C. down to Florida. I know no one. There's one me and there's thousands of employees. And so I'm like, okay, how do I build relationships? Because I'm coming from a place where I was there for 10 years. I knew I had relationships. I knew the institutional knowledge. That was a superpower of mine. But I'm coming here and I have none of that. And I think that didn't really hit me until I got here. Like, whoa, I don't know the context of a lot of this. And so I said, well, how can I fast track this? Because there's only one of me. So I had a good friend who recommended this sort of concept of get to know me in 1 minute. And it's a slide. So on one side, I had who I am, career and education. So I just put pictures up. Then on the other side, I had family and personal life. And then I put pictures up. So when I got here and I'm going to different department meetings, introducing myself, I would go through that slide, because essentially what I was doing was lowering the waterline on me. Hey, this is who I am. This is where I went to school. This is where I work. These are this is my family. This is what I like to do on the weekend. So on the slide, you'll see that I made a pound cake once. I haven't made one again. You'll see that I like to run. You'll see that I cycle. You'll see that I'm a huge Big Brother fan. But in doing that, I was allowing the thousands of people that I was trying to meet figure out a connection point to me. Right. So when they saw me in the hallway, or when they sent me an email, they could say, hey, I love to bake cakes too. Or, hey, I like Big Brother. Or, hey, I went to Furman. So it allowed those to see where they could connect with me, because when you come into a role, especially as an executive, people can be standoffish. They don't know how to approach you. And I think one of the things that I pride myself in, I hope being able to do, is giving them a little ease in that. Like, hey, I put on my shoes just like you do. Let's talk. Let's get to know each other. And let's get to build. So relationships are key. So if you can understand and master the ability to build and connect with people where you are today, it will carry you far in life, no matter what career path or success path you take.
Mic drop on that. That is so beautifully said. You know, related to that and relationships is the idea of mentors. And I know that you've been a phenomenal mentor to young people. But in what role have mentors played in your life and your growth and your trajectory?
Mentors have been key. Tobi has always been in that list of people to call, especially when I first graduated and relocated. She was probably one of the professional people that I had a more intimate relationship where I could say, hey, I might have messed this up. What should I do? I could be fully transparent. And so mentorships are important for every stage of your life. Mentors may change. I think that also mentors provide you a safe space to land when you don't know what's happening around you. Because it goes back to, again, what I said earlier, you don't know what you don't know. And when you get into the workplace, there's a level of politics, there's a level of nuance, there's a level of unfamiliarity that you may experience, because it's different than maybe a casual environment you may have had in your undergrad institution, or maybe even as college advising corp. When you look at the organizations you're going into, are they more conservative? Are they more, and I say conservative in just how they carry themselves, not the political stance, but like, how are they? Are they like necktie? Are they casual jeans and t-shirts? So those are all nuances that you want to try to figure out, so you can figure out and ensure that you're coming at and approaching the work in the right manner. When you find a good mentor, I think it's important to understand that as the mentee, you should be driving that relationship. I tell, people reach out, would you mind being a mentor for me? And if I give you my word and say, hey, I'm happy to support you in that way, I am, and I mean it. But I also don't want you to take, if I don't respond to an email in 24 hours, that, oh, he doesn't want to work with me. No, I just had 500 other emails. So that's where you want to be professionally persistent, like, hey, just circling back here. Or even, I have a mentor, his name is Eric Hutcherson. He's a head of HR for Universal Music. And he helped guide me through my transition from Monumental to NASCAR. But he was like, look, the best time to catch me is like 6 a.m. I would call him at 6 a.m. because I could get a 15, 20, 30-minute window where he's like, hey, I'm doing my morning walk, or hey, I'm working out, or hey, I'm in my commute. So you want to figure out, like, when does your mentor have some idle time that you kind of insert yourself into? And then when you have those conversations, have a list of sort of things you want to discuss or walk through with your mentor. But I don't want people to think that because they may be delayed in getting back to you, that they don't want to help you. And so I consistently tell the people that I support, like, hey, I'm in the weeds right now, but let's find time to talk. Or, hey, I'll call you tonight at 9 p.m. So I just remember, you need to be in a driver's seat. Another thing, in getting a mentor, make the ask flat out. Don't beat around the bush. Just like, hey, I've enjoyed getting to know you and network with you. I believe that you could really be impactful into how I look at developing my career, how I look at exploring opportunities. Would you be open, and do you have the bandwidth and capacity to serve as a mentor to me? Then your next question comes is, what type of cadence do you think we could find some synergy around connecting? And then you figure out what is the best way, or what channels do you want me to reach out to you via? So some people say, hey, I have an executive assistant, coordinate through them. Some people say, hey, just text me. So figure out what that is for them, and then you fall in line and continue to drive that relationship.
That is so important, that idea of driving the relationship, because, people are busy, but that doesn't mean they don't care, like you said. And so not being afraid to insert yourself and be the one that reaches out, I think is really important. So that's really powerful. We're going to ask you a couple more questions, John, and then open up for Q&A. So if you have any questions, I see there are 4 already in the chat. There were questions on Whova before you even started. So people are excited. Someone commented too in the chat, it's not even 12:30 and I have pages of notes. So
all right.
You have no doubt shared a lot of wisdom already. Our theme for the sessions today is life after the core. And as our advisors look to their future after the core, what advice do you have for them as early career professionals? How can they set a vision for their career?
I think a big moment here is to ensure that you have a growth mindset. So there's a fixed mindset, which is I am who I am and I can't change anything around me. This is it. A growth mindset means that I can get there. I probably need to practice. I probably need to have some repetition. I probably need to maybe fail fast and fail forward, but continue to learn. So never stop learning. But the biggest part of that is the power of yet. The power of yet. I haven't gotten that promotion yet. I haven't landed that job opportunity yet. The power of yet is really an early childhood sort of framework for teaching little kids. When I work with, I feel like my greatest lessons in being a manager, being executive, being a friend, being a colleague have been from my 2 daughters, Maddie and Olivia, because I have to respond to each of them differently. Maddie's kind of like me, so she can take a little tough love and keep it moving. Olivia is my sweetheart. She is sensitive, but very passionate. So if I give Olivia feedback, she's like, you don't like me and you don't love me. She's just, and I'm like, all I asked you to do was throw your plate away. And so in that, when you're managing people in the workplace, I had to realize that it's the same relationship. How I need to talk to you may be different from how I need to talk to you. And so in understanding that, you have to have a specific message for that specific audience. It's not one size fits all. So when I'm teaching my daughters, and I think they believe that daddy just woke up and knew how to drive a car, daddy woke up and knew how to tie his shoes, daddy woke up and knew how to, ride a bike. No. And so I say, you can't do it yet, because they'll say, this is too hard, daddy, I can't do it. You can't do it yet. And so that's instilling a growth mindset at a young age. I can't do it right now, but I just can't yet. I'll get there. And so I tell you, early in your career, you're probably thinking, I need to graduate and make X amount of dollars. I need to graduate and have this type of car, this type of apartment. I'm telling you right now, believe in the power of yet. All of that will come. When I moved to DC, I had 3 roommates and no job. 3 roommates and no job. And I took the smallest bedroom in that apartment so that I could have the cheapest rent. And so even seeing where I am today, it would have never been on a vision board at 21, 22. And so that goes back to flow to where the opportunities are. That was a big bit of advice that my mentor gave to me when I was considering leaving my last role. Because I thought, I was born and raised in Greenville, South Carolina, went to college in Greenville, South Carolina. I moved to DC and said, yep, I'll be here, but then I'll go back to Greenville, South Carolina. I never saw a third stop that included Daytona Beach, Florida. So when different opportunities were coming my way, I was like, no, it's not in DC, not interested. He's like, what are you doing? I was like, we're not moving. And then he's like, but you should still take the call and be curious about what the opportunity could be. So then I was like, okay, so I go and have a conversation with my wife, and she's like, yeah, I figured we move. I'm like, how am I the only person who thought we were here forever? And so with that, flow to where the opportunities are was a life lesson that I learned. So it goes back to life isn't scripted. So that success path, success is going to carry you many different ways and take you through various nuances and channels that you probably don't have on your vision board today. And then I would say, you are responsible for your professional development. I think a lot of times an error that young professionals and even older professionals will make is that they're waiting for their manager to tap them on the shoulder and say, we want you to be the next CEO. That's not going to happen. I want you to be a person that asks good questions, stays curious, and figures out, how can I carry more water? That's what I like to say. How can I carry more water? My cup might be full, but I want to add more water to this, because that's you showing the organization how you can contribute in different areas than maybe where your current scope is. I also believe closed mouths do not get fed. And so you have to speak up for what you want. A quick story there, when I was at Hyatt, I got there, I was excited. I moved to DC, no job, smallest bedroom, 2 other roommates. So I'm eager. I get there, but my name tag just had John on it. So I looked around, I'm like, well, other people have their full name. And so I started saying, how do you get your full name? And I was like, oh, that's for management. I was like, oh, okay. So managers have their full name. So casually, I just started saying, well, I want to get my full name on my name tag. And it became kind of like this playful banter. But what I didn't realize was that I was speaking into existence. I was manifesting. I was letting people know my desire to grow. And so that was the first time I realized, wait, and it didn't hit me till years after I was in that role of what I was doing unbeknownst to me. So when the opportunity for growth came, they were like, John, you ready to get your last name or your name? And I was like, yes, what is it? But I had sort of been planting that seed unbeknownst to me. So I tell you that story, and that, closed mouths don't get fed. When you've been in a role for about, I think your first year in a role, you're learning the role. I think the second year in a role is where you can make an impact. But every time you have those professional development conversations or success path conversations with your leader, you should be talking about, how can I grow? What are the things I should start doing, stop doing, and continue doing? What other areas of the business can I contribute? But you should also come to that table with some ideas yourself, because unbeknownst to you, you're going to plant a seed, and they're going to be in another meeting having another conversation, and some opportunity is going to come up that is aligned with what you planted the seed for. And they're going to say, hey, Tobi can do that. She's raised her hand for that. This is great. Like, yeah, Tobi can do it. So keep that. And then finally, I would say your greatest ability is your availability. Be available. Your greatest ability is your availability. Be available. There will be spur of the moment opportunities for you to connect with someone and engage. Don't let those moments pass you by.
That's awesome. Advisors can certainly relate to that. First year is learning, second year, you really know what you're doing, because we hear that a lot, where first year they're figuring it out, second year is where they feel like they're really in the flow. This has just been amazing. And one of my last questions is actually a question that I'm going to jump off in the Q&A section. Someone asked, and this is on Whova, what are the qualities you look for in a person who you think is a potential fit for a post or looking for a career? So what are those qualities that really stand out when you're interviewing or hiring someone?
All right. So when I think about it from where you all in your career, it's really, for me, hire the attitude and train the skill. And I believe the attitude is key for all levels of your career, but having growth mindset, curiosity, but good attitude, because we can't teach you attitude. If you just have a bad attitude, it's hard to sort of rewire that. But if you come into the table and like, I want to be a sponge, I can learn, I'm a quick learner, I know how to problem solve, I know how to connect with people, that will carry you a long way. And it will be evident from the time you come into an interview space, if that's kind of the energy and vibe you bring to that moment. So, and guess what? I get it. Some people are not extroverts. I'm an extrovert, so I can come in and that comes natural to me to present that. But if you're an introvert, you have to figure out, how do I make that come alive for me? And typically that's in a more one-to-one setting. So you figure out what makes this comfortable for me. When you're coming in, it's about, how can I showcase my attitude and my ability to learn, my ability to problem solve. There's going to be, we need X, Y, Z years of experience. Yes, and you're going to have some transferable skills where you can incorporate into that experience. But I think the biggest thing you want to make sure you showcase is a can-do attitude.
Yeah, that's awesome. And really, I know you're talking about early career, but what you're advising is lifelong, because I would say that those are approaches that I continue to take too as an adult. We've got a question here in the Q&A, which is, what helped you continue to search for a job after hearing so many no's? Many of our second year advisors are preparing now for that job search after they leave college advising course. So how do you deal with a lot of no's. How do you keep moving them forward?
Yes. How take a no as a learning moment. And I'm a big believer now, hindsight. So when I was 21, 22, getting a bunch of no's right out of college, it makes you start to reflect like, well, is something wrong with me? And I have to realize, no, nothing is wrong with me. I just haven't found the yes that is for me. So quick rundown, I applied for Bank of America, teller jobs, didn't get that. I applied for Target management training program, didn't get that. I applied for enterprise management training program. My friends were like, don't do the enterprise job because like they have you in a suit and they'll tell you to go wash your car and you just got to wash it in your suit. But I need a job. So I go in, but in that repetition and practice of interviewing, I got better at it. So I want to tell you now, you need to practice interviewing. You got to practice. So it probably wasn't until fourth or fifth no that I kind of feel like I had a cadence of how I should present myself, how I should respond to these questions. Then I will go back and think. I'll never forget the enterprise interview. I walked out, Tobi, and I said, I did not stop talking. I just talked the entire time. I don't think the interviewer asked but one question and I just kept going. I was like, well, I don't think that was for me, but that comes with practice. And so I continue to perfect the skill, and you just have to stay hungry and know that there's a moment for you. But for me, how I was able to weather the storm was that I picked up part-time jobs. So I told you I worked at DSW Shoes. I eventually got a job working at FedEx Field as a concession stand manager. I made $100 on a game day and I worked probably 12 hours. Then the best life hack, you want a life hack? Waiting tables. I waited tables my first 3 years in DC. If you are unsure what your sort of full-time gig will be, wait tables. I was able to pay off my student loans. I was able to buy a car, all from waiting tables. Now, to be clear, I worked every day of the week because I got the full-time job at Hyatt. I would leave Hyatt on Friday, go to the restaurant, wait tables Friday night, wait tables all day Saturday, and probably have one shift on Sunday. But I had a mission. I was like, if I can pay off these student loans from this waiting tables, because guess what? My Hyatt job wasn't breaking the bank in any way. So I had to figure out how can I supplement myself. So wait tables, I think it's a great transferable skill too, because guess what you're doing every time you approach a table? You're networking. You're perfecting the art of getting to know people. You're perfecting the art of understanding how to read body language too. So I say there's going to be some no's, but there's a yes. So when I get to this career transition to NASCAR, there were still no's. So I don't want you to think that like, oh, when you reach a certain level, there's a bunch of yeses. No, there were still no's. But when I look back at the no's that I did receive and events that have transpired since then for said organization, God had a plan for me that didn't align with where that organization was. And so there have been like, ooh, I dodged a bullet. Look at that. I'm glad I didn't go there. And so just continue to lean into the process, build relationships, and build your network.
Yeah, you just haven't gotten yes yet.
Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. Sabrina asked, what tips do you have for emotional intelligence for introverts?
Thank you, Sabrina. Emotional intelligence is really understanding how you show up, how you impact group dynamics. There's an article, and I'll send it to Tobi if you could get it out to the group. I'm drawing a blank on who it's by, but it's really brief and it shows you some of the 5 components or 6 components of emotional intelligence. I don't think emotional intelligence is an introvert versus extrovert thing. I think it's more so how you manage your emotions, because I can be introvert or extrovert and still get really angry. I think the greatest gift that you can do at your age, or no matter where you are in your career, is be open to feedback and learn how to accept it with grace and say thank you. Mentor once told me, you're going to get some feedback that you don't agree with. You're going to get some feedback that you probably should agree with. And one of the things I will say is take time to process that feedback. So if you get something that immediately maybe you get defensive, immediately you don't know how to process it, just in that moment say, thank you so much for the feedback. I like to take some time to process this. Could we have a follow-up conversation? Because once you've had time to go home, sleep on it, replay some events in your head, 9 times out of 10, what they provided to you was constructive and something that you should use and how you navigate going forward, then maybe there's 10, 15, 25% that you should throw out with the bathwater. Yeah, I'm throwing that out with the bathwater. But don't reject the gift of feedback. And I think many people don't provide it. So when they do, really take heed to it and figure out how you can incorporate that into your path going forward. So if I can find this article, I'll put it here in the chat because I think I have it in my Dropbox.
Okay, awesome. There's a really good Harvard Business Review article too that goes into emotional intelligence. Since HR, this is from Josh, since HR was not necessarily your intended career, how did you know you wanted to continue to pursue that success path? And have you ever wavered? Great question, Josh.
Yes, Josh. Guess what? About a year and a half at Hyatt, I wanted to move to sales. I was like, look, they're making more money than me. I'm trying to go to sales. I applied for a job in the sales department, did not get it. And they had someone that was already sort of a peer of me and a peer of mine in their department. And that was the next step for them. They're like, well, we give you the coordinator. I was like, no, I always want to try to go upward and onward. But so much of what I've been able to take from the HR space and even the areas of sales that I like translate to HR. So what I am doing in an employment brand situation is growing the brand of NASCAR. That is sales. So the ability to connect with people, all of that still translates from sales to HR to many things that you'll continue to do in life. So I did consider some different avenues, but again, there's a reason why there was a no there, and why I sat and stayed in the HR space, but then was immediately presented with the opportunity to grow. I think the biggest thing for me when I am in organizations is, am I still able to learn here? I think there are times we have to have a conversation with self. Maybe I have outgrown this space, and that's nothing negative to the space. That's just the vision and success path that you see for yourself. And so when I think about my career, and when I would tell you in your career, never lose sight of that. Because I think, people say, what was maybe your greatest failure in your career? I would say, I wouldn't call it a failure, but complacency, getting comfortable.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that idea of continuing to be challenged and grow. We have a really interesting question in Whova from Carmen. At this point of your career, what is your dream job title?
That's to be determined, but I haven't stopped. So I don't know what it will be. But I definitely see myself growing beyond the specific scope of human resources, because I actually believe that to be a good leader, having a true understanding of the human capital space is really helpful. I also believe that being a server in a restaurant is really impactful and a skill that you can take anywhere in your career. Because I think there's a level of just understanding and humility that come with both of those roles that I think make you relatable. But I also, when you get to a certain level in an organization, it's about driving outcomes, but it's about motivating a team to put on that seatbelt and go around that track with you. So a lot of what I see at the C-suite level is you got to motivate and encourage people to lean into the power of yet, to have a growth mindset, to be excited. Because guess what? There's going to be turbulence. There's going to be speed bumps. There may even be a crash, but we're going to get back up and we're going to keep going.
I'm writing that down. That is awesome. Yes. So true. I mean, John, you've always been an incredible natural leader. So that is definitely, you're leading now, but even at higher levels, that will happen. Do you remember, let's see what we are on time. Okay, we've got 3 questions still, or 4 here in Q&A. We have a few more minutes, so keep them coming. Do you remember what you put on your vision board in your 20s, or did you have a vision board?
I did not. My vision board in my 20s was, is it 5 o'clock yet? Who wants to go? Well, I was going to a next job pretty much early in my 20s. It was like, well, I got to clock out and go over here. But yeah, I didn't have a vision board. I think I naturally have always wanted more. And so whatever more looked like at that time, but also I was never afraid of putting in the work to get more. I think that's important. You have to have your own drive, and nothing in life is going to be given to you. So know that it's going to take some work. And I think when I read research on the emerging workforce, and when I think about this group potentially being primarily digital natives, here's an opportunity that I think I want you to be aware of. This group, including myself, I'm a millennial. Social media, I get to take 15 pictures, figure out the best one, put a filter, get the caption just right. Whenever I do a video or some content, I make sure my highlight reel is what I'm showing. But I think in the art of having social media, where I only can let you see what is the best of me, it sometimes has limited our ability to show up in person and have a first impression. Because when you go to that job interview, you don't get to go back and redo it. So practice the art of showing up authentically, and being able to do it without the opportunity to do it again. My wife is a professor at Howard University in the School of Business, and she has observed too that students, they struggle with showing up without having the opportunity to sort of practice and perfect it. So show up and be yourself. A pro tip, when you're going into interviews, figure out small talk. When you get there, from the time you hit that campus, you are interviewing. So everyone that you interview with, whether it's a security guard, receptionist, custodian, be nice to them. Have small talk. When the interviewer comes out, when you're sitting in that lobby, let's be clear. I don't want you on your phone. I don't want you playing a game. You need to be sitting there, proper pose, sitting up high, ready for the person to come out and greet you. But then have small talk. The best small talk question is, how was your commute in today? Oh, isn't it nice outside? That allows you to kind of warm up and ease into the cadence of the interview. But guess what? The interviewer may be nervous too. So it allows them to kind of warm up and ease into the cadence. Second life hack, do your research on who is going to interview you. You talk about what makes you stand out. I'll never forget when I was at Monumental, there was someone who clearly went to my LinkedIn. They're like, oh, I saw you went to Furman University. My brother went to Furman. So we had a small talk about Furman. After I've talked to maybe 50 people about the same role, the Furman University person is what stood out. And it wasn't because they went to Furman, it's because they established something personal to me, right, or between us that no one else did. So those are some pro tips that I'll share with you all. And I see HU's in the chat. Yes,
Okay. We're going to bring it down to just one or two more questions. This is a really good one, and I'm going to pull this one out because I see this a lot from my role too. Enrique asked, do you have any tips on this is kind of like a three-parter, so get ready. Do you have any tips on managing up and building a relationship with your boss so when the time comes, they fight for you in conversations that include salary increases and promotions? So I think it would be really great to hear your perspective on that, because I know that's something that I've come up upon in terms of how you support employees and their salary increases, and what is the best way if you're the employee to approach that and manage your own expectations in that.
And who asked that question?
Enrique.
Enrique, thank you. Good question. Good question. Let me tell you another life hack pro tip. Get on TikTok. Who in the chat has TikTok on their phone? I know you do. I know you have it. I know you probably have all the dances perfected. TikTok, get on there. Hashtag HR TikTok. Hashtag negotiation TikTok. Hashtag management TikTok. TikTok has a wealth of information. Let it be known, when I was preparing for my interview to come to NASCAR and pursue other career opportunities, I was on TikTok trying to figure out, like, what's the best way to answer that question? What's another way for me to think about that response? What are some good questions for me to ask? So leverage the power of TikTok, because there are professionals and experts giving out free information and free content there. So managing up, it goes back to lowering the waterline. So some things that I learned, or probably was trained coming up, was, you get into the workplace, you don't talk about politics, you don't talk about religion, you don't talk about how much money you make. It's kind of what my mom said. These are things you don't talk about in the workplace. It's a little more nuanced than that, because you want to be able to build a relationship with people. I'm not saying you're going in and you're talking about the front page of the Washington Post every day, but I want you to not be afraid to let the people that are leading you know who you are, know what you're passionate about, know what you're doing on the weekend. Here's a pro tip for this. I heard this at a conference recently. Typically you're in a meeting and maybe there's small talk before a meeting and they say, well, how are you? And you just say, I'm fine. Okay, nothing's wrong with that. But another way to flip that, especially when there's someone from senior management, someone that you would like to get exposure to, or make sure they have the exposure to what you're doing, your impact, start responding with, I'm excited to share. I'm excited to share that I just got my certification in project management. I'm excited to share that I contributed to the press release that just came out today. I'm excited to share that my team, and this was my role in this project, or I'm happy to share. So don't just say, I'm fine, I'm well, and kind of miss the moment. How can you grow your brand in that moment? So I'm excited to share, I'm happy to share. The next thing on the sort of having those compensation conversations, do your research. Don't lead with emotion in that space. I think it's always fair to have an understanding of what industry benchmarks are and figure out if you're falling in line with that, but also look at your performance. Are you a top performer? You can't be an underperformer and then come in and try to demand more money. And also know that when your compensation may increase, your scope may increase. So what is that give take that you want to have in that space? Don't ever come in and say, well, I know that, John makes X and I don't. Don't do that. You're talking about the value that you add to the organization. So the conversation should be centered around you. Next thing I would say, there's two types of currency in the workplace that you want to keep on your radar. There's your social currency, and then there's your job currency. So your job currency is, am I a master at the role that they are paying me to do? So great. You want to be good at what they're paying you to do. Some people have the concept, just head down, do your work. I advise to be more flexible there. You don't want to just be head down, because when you're head down, your social currency drops. Your social currency is when you figure out ways where you're introverted, extroverted, to go to those team activities, to go to that happy hour or go to that lunch outing, because you want people to be able to have stories to share with you outside of your job, because that's where you connect with people. So when that manager gets behind closed doors, or that leadership team gets behind closed doors, and there's a list of people on that paper, and they're like, okay, well, John was the top seller and Joe was the number 2 seller. But Joe has gone to every sort of social outing. He's built relationships. They know that Joe just had a baby. They know that Joe just did this, because Joe didn't just say, I'm fine. He said, I'm excited to share. Guess who gets the job? Possibly Joe, because he had relationships in the room that carried him through that conversation. So you want to keep both of those currencies in parallel. You don't want your job currency to drop, because you got to be able to do the job, but you don't want your social currency to drop. So you want to try to figure out, how can you keep those currencies in balance? So that's what I would say there. Thank you for the question.
That's great advice, John. This has been such a powerful conversation on so many levels for me personally, because I just adore you and I'm so proud of you. And so you've just always been special. And I think that's what everyone is probably seeing today. I mean, you just didn't come to this place. You are unique and special. And so thank you for sharing all of your gifts today. We heard so many powerful quotes and comments from you today. Success path, to be open and willing for the windy, different places that your career can take you, flow where the opportunities go. You talk so much about relationships, and that's so powerful, both the relationships that advisors have with students and the impact that they can have, but also the relationships they have in the workplace and how to leverage those. You talked about emotional intelligence and growth mindset, being open to learn, and the power of yet, which I love. And you just talked about so many wonderful things. So I know that your thoughts and comments will live on in many people's minds and influence them as they move forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Tobi, and thank you for giving me my start. Look, who knew that Bridges to a Brighter Future was the catalyst that I needed to set a spark in me and building relationships, connecting with people, but understanding the power of giving back, understanding the power of storytelling. So thank you for that opportunity. I don't know if this group knows about the paperclip. Typically, when you would interview with Tobi back in the day, she'd give you a paperclip. I can't remember what the outcome of that was, but I definitely was like, why is she giving me this paperclip? But thank you for seeing something in me that I didn't see in myself at that time, and giving me such a strong foundation.
Such my honor, John. Such my honor.